One, we're live. This is attorney Vincent Davis, and this is The Secret, How to Fight CPS and Win. It's a Sunday morning, and I'm here with a very special guest, Miss Allie Jewell. Miss Jewell, how are you?
I'm fine. How are you?
Good. Why don't you tell our audience where you're broadcasting from?
I'm in the Bay Area in California. Actually,
Oh,
Vallejo,
good.
California. So
Very good. Very good.
Mhm.
Where is Vallejo in relationship to like San Francisco and Oakland?
It is probably 10 minutes away from Oakland, maybe 15 away from San Francisco.
Okay.
So about 5-minute ferry ride if you take the ferry. So
Are
not that
you
far.
are you a BART user?
No, definitely not.
No. I in the past I've done cases up in San Francisco,
Oh,
the
okay.
city, the city and county of San Francisco, I guess is what they call it.
Yeah.
And I would fly into San Francisco from Burbank Airport and down here, and I would land, and I figured out that there was a way to catch a train, some kind of commuter train,
Hmm.
from the airport all the way into the downtown area, and it dropped me off a block away from the courthouse.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Usually when I travel, I've got to take, the 45-minute or 60-minute Uber ride someplace.
Yeah.
But San Francisco has a mass transit system, that's one of the best, I guess, in the country. LA is still trying to catch up with you guys.
Right. Yeah. It's pretty convenient when you need
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
So tell us, what is your connection to CPS?
So I have 6 kids. s- um 5 years ago they got taken. So I had my first two daughters with me, and then when I went into labor with my third kid, which is my first son, um I tested positive for drugs, and they came into the hospital and they took him, but they didn't have a warrant. They didn't really have, anything to stand for. They came to my house. I actually let them in because I felt like I didn't have anything to hide, so they came in, and in the reports it said that everything looked fine. I had food in the fridge. There's a place for them to sleep. I had clean clothes. I had learning posters all over the wall. There wasn't really much of an issue. But they still took him, and they just like made my life hell ever since. They told me even if because I got into a program, they told me even if I finish the program, that doesn't mean I'm going to get my kids back. They made up tons of lies in the reports. They even had my mom like making up lies about my mom, what she said, and I mean, they turned me and my kid's father against each other and made me move out, and I mean, it just went downhill from there.
I receive all the time reports from people that the social worker has not told the truth or exaggerated somehow. And, many, I guess maybe 5, 6, 7 years ago, I did a case up in Northern California, north of where you are at.
Mm.
And I appeared at the first hearing, and I was arguing to get the kids back. And there was one fact that I couldn't overcome, and I didn't get the kids back at that hearing. Um, and that was the social worker quoted one of the children, the oldest child, who at the time was like 12 or 13, quoted and said the child said, Mom's been acting weird and she hit me. All right. And so the judge relied on that in making the detention orders, and eventually relied on it as part of the reason why not to give the children back at the jurisdictional dispositional hearing. Eventually, and lucky for my client, the kid was placed, or the kids were placed with a grandparent, a set of grandparents. And the only bad thing about it was that the grandparents lived in another state.
Mm.
They eventually got legal guardianship of the children. The parents never got the children back, but the parents did move to the state where the children were and lived not too far from the grandparents. Apparently, saw the kids every day and talked to the kids. The case is closed, right? And they they did an interview of the kid who allegedly said this statement right at the beginning of the case, because the client had always maintained that she hadn't hit the child or anything like that. And apparently, the kid said, I never told the social worker that. She asked me, didn't mommy hit you? And the child allegedly responded, no. But when it showed up in the report, it was, child told me mommy hit her. You see how that just little twist on the facts
Yeah.
doesn't seem like a big lie, but it turns out it's one of the reasons why the children never were returned to the parents. And it changed the course of these children's lives, of this family's life, and they spent a fortune, trying to fight this case. They hired me. They had another very well-known CPS attorney, and it seemed at every turn the social worker would just, change the fact a little bit, and it made it so that we had a very conservative judge. That the judge felt the children shouldn't be replaced with the parents. But here's the really crazy thing about it. The grandparents lived in another state in the South. After guardianship was granted, the parents moved back to this state, lived like, I guess, down the street and around the corner from from the kids. And the kids were basically taken care of by the parents. They just couldn't live in the same home.
Wow.
You see how crazy this is? I heard of a story it was a few months ago, where grandma um, adopted the child, moved, and the mother went with grandma, and the grandma just gave the child back to the mother, and they went on with their life in another location.
Yeah. That would be awesome. You
But
know,
and by the way, I'm not saying people should do that. It's obviously illegal, but you see how sometimes these little lies, but allegedly by social workers, change the course of people's lives, their children's life, everything.
absolutely. Yeah.
Well,
I wish, my mom has my kids too. And, she's been thinking about moving, and she says that she just doesn't want to leave me. And, I'm more than happy to go with her, and actually right now she has cancer. And so,
yeah,
it's actually rough. But, I'm able to see my kids and stuff too, but, and I do. It is hard though, because they can't leave with me. And actually, I have my youngest. When I had my youngest daughter, she's a year now. They let me take her home with, she came home with me. So when we go and see my other kids, it's kind of hard because they're like, well, why is she going home with you and we can't,
right.
So
If your mom has guardianship, you can always apply to terminate the guardianship and get the kids back.
right, right, and that's what I was going to ask you. So if I were to do that, so I know I'd have to go to court again and stuff, but can I bring up all the illegal stuff that they did and or whatever in court, or would that matter?
No. And this
Okay.
is the hardest thing for people to realize. In the juvenile case itself, once a judge has made a decision, even if it's based on what you to believe is fraudulent information or false information, and you don't appeal and win, it's over. It's like the Ten Commandments. It's written in stone, can't be changed.
Yeah.
Okay, now a lot of people find that, obviously unfair. But the time to fight all of this is in the CPS court immediately. And if you don't win, you need to appeal it. Now, here's where the little trick comes in. Some people don't take this seriously. I've had a lot of people tell me, I can't believe they wouldn't give me my kids back. They go to court thinking everything's going to be fair, everything's going to be justice, like they define justice. And then they get to court and find out, oh, justice is, defines another way,
Right.
in
Yeah.
a way that they never would have dreamed. And then it becomes too late. And there used to be, I won't mention any names, but there's a very well-known attorney in California who's a guru at civil rights cases against social workers in counties. And I'm not going to quote him, but if you want him to sue the county and you've lost the jurisdictional dispositional hearing, that gives a level of complexity to your case that your case may not be economically feasible to pursue. So, you go to these adjudication and jurisdictional hearings and dispositional hearings thinking, oh, it's no big deal. And it is a big deal. I divide the CPS case history into about six possible modules. And this is what happens and what people don't understand. Let's say you lose everything up in module 3, okay? And you finally get your head together and you want to go back in module 5 and tell the judge why he or she made a mistake in module 3. Module 3 is over and done with. But Mr. Davis, I got screwed and this is how I got screwed. Hey, man, I understand. The problem is that even if it was false and even if you're right, there's nothing you can do. You had your day in court in module 3, you lost, you never appealed, or you didn't win your appeal, and it's like the 10 commandments, it's written in stone. And
Right. And so in the beginning of my court cases, I had documents showing that I have over like 10 years experience with kids. I worked in childcares, daycares, had my own classroom and all that stuff. My lawyer didn't submit the papers at all. I corrected the court reports. I showed them to my lawyer and she never brought anything up in court. And that the problem is too, is before you go into the courtroom, you talk to your lawyer outside, of that room. And they're going to say, this is what's going to happen. So we're going to do this. I'm going to talk to the judge about this, ask him this and all this. And then when the judge asks you if you understand, just say yes. And then boom, we're done. And that's the problem. The judge asks you if you understand and you say yes, but if you don't understand, you shouldn't say yes, and
absolutely right.
don't let it go any further, don't
Right.
trust your lawyer. That's half the time, most of the time.
2 decades ago, maybe almost 3 decades ago, I used to be a court appointed attorney in Los Angeles County. And one of the things that you have to do if your client is not going to have a trial at the adjudication and dispositional hearing phase is, you have to tell them or advise them to plead no contest. In LA, they used to, I don't know if they still do, you had a mandatory form you had to fill out. I wish I knew the JV number, but it's called advisement of rights. It's a similar form is used in criminal cases also if you're deciding to take a plea without a trial. And it's very detailed. And you have to initial like each box on 2 sides and then sign the back. And one of the things that I tried to do on every case, if somebody didn't want a trial, I didn't want them coming back and say, well, I should have had a trial. Like if you want to have a trial, we're going to have the trial. But this form that they use makes it clear and it explains everything to you when you're giving up your rights to a trial. Now, I would bet $1 just from listening to you, you never had that form.
No.
Yeah, yeah. And you know what? The sad thing is, as I think back on it, I think it's a state form, and I think its use is mandatory. Because a lot of cases I've seen in the past, I'll be sitting in court or online in court, and what they'll do is they'll sometimes, it's called a waiver. They'll take the waiver and plea just orally, just verbally. And I think I can't remember because I don't do a lot of plea bargaining. I think the form is mandatory in use. I'm not sure, but I'd have to take a look at the form. But yeah, I mean, just from talking to you, just listening to you, I knew you didn't sign that form
Yeah.
because it's very detailed and it explains everything. And sometimes when people look at that form and have to initial every box and sign on the back, they say, "Wait a minute, I didn't know I was giving up this right. I
Right.
didn't know that this was going to happen." You know, and that's why they have the form. So you can't say, "I didn't know." If you don't know or you don't like it, let's have a trial.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of people, because I'd be like, look, I was telling people like, look, this is what they're doing wrong. And a lot of people would be like, well, you can't point out what they're doing wrong. They're involved and that's it. And that's what's done. And now you just have to do whatever they say, and I wish I would have trusted my own gut,
Well,
and spoke up in court and, asked all the questions that I had and stuff. Cause
Well, the likelihood of you being successful at what I'm going to tell you is very low. There is something in the law, in California law, it's a certain type of writ. And I'm trying to think of the name. It's a Latin name, but it's a type of writ that you can file at any time in the case, even years later, to get something overturned because of a miscarriage of justice. Um, a writ of quantum novus. That's the name of it. That's the Latin name. And I think I might have been in practice 15 or 20 years before I ever heard of that. And someone that worked for me, he was a retired judge, told me about this. And I looked it up and, because I thought, this can't be true. How could I have practiced law 15, 20 years and not ever heard of this? Now, if you do file the writ, that doesn't mean you're going to win, right? But it is available. It's a long shot method, but you can always go back in your situation and file a petition, a 388 petition, to either expand your visitation, to change the type of visitation you have, the frequency, the duration, supervised versus unsupervised, overnight versus no overnights. Or you can also file a petition to get the kids returned to you. Okay? So if that's something that you want to do, that's better than running off to another county or state and having the grandma give you the kids back, illegally,
Yeah,
when you can just file the petition to get the kids back there
that makes
or
sense.
in that format.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So, so consider that, and
Yeah,
it really works. It works well when the caretaker is a friendly relative or a friend or someone who wants to see you reunite with the children.
right. Yeah, because my mom is tired.
Right.
She is, and I know I have to do my part too, and you know, show that I'm willing and able to even care for them. So
Yeah, and just think of it. Jerry Spence, who's a very famous trial lawyer, once told me something. He said, Vince, you have to look at the case from the judge's point of view. And I started thinking about that, and I like, why should I do that? It's my point of view that counts. And he correctly informed me that it wasn't my point of view that counts because I'm not making the decision. So here's a tip from Jerry Spence. All right. Some say he's the greatest trial lawyer ever in America. And that's Jerry, Gerry Spence. You can Google him. Famous, famous trial lawyer. And he says, don't look at the case from your glasses. Look at the case from the judge's glasses, the jury's glasses, the opponent's glasses, the opposing attorney's glasses, because that's how you have to win a case. If you just go in there looking at the case from your perspective, you're probably going to have a loser because there's other people in the courtroom and they have their own beliefs and agenda. Okay.
right.
A lot of people want to go to court and just prove that they're right. That's a hard thing to do.
Yeah.
So I tell people, do you want to win or do you want to be right?
Yeah, there's a difference there.
There's a big difference.
I have a question. So, like I said, I had 5 kids, right? So they took them when I was having my 3rd kid. So I had my 4th kid. They came to the hospital, took him. I was clean, at the time. But so when I had my 5th kid, the first court date that I had to go, they immediately said that I was going to take the stand and I had to go to trial right then and there. The first court date, is that okay?
No.
Okay, yeah, because I wasn't ready. I didn't know anything about it. I mean, it was totally just, I was shocked.
You know what might have happened is there were previous court dates on that child that you allegedly missed, but of course you were never notified. In juvenile court, they're very fast and loose with the notice requirements under the 14th Amendment to the Constitution. So you probably got there like on the second or third hearing, didn't know it was the second or third hearing. You thought it was the first hearing, and it was set for trial. Now, what you could have done, but you probably didn't know this, is object to the previous notice, and say, look, I want to have a trial, but I want it at another date. I have had no time to prepare, to bring witnesses, to bring documents to defend myself. And it's because the social worker hasn't noticed me in a timely manner. You probably would have gotten that continuance. Not to say that you would have definitely won at the next court hearing, right? I'm not saying that because I don't know anything about your case, but you would have, most judges would have given you a continuance.
Right.
Now, here's one of the economic aspects of the case. Let's say that I'm your court appointed attorney, okay? And you just show up for the first time. It's the third hearing, it's set for trial. My incentive sometimes is to get rid of your case. I might have 300 cases, right? And if I figure, I look at you, talk to you, figure out that it doesn't matter if the case is going to be continued or not, you're going to lose today or 2 weeks from now, you know, I might not even tell you that. I've seen that happen,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So,
Everyone's case is different.
yeah.
So so I had a question. So I know that it's for if we have questions or our story to tell, but I'm on a lot of these Facebook groups, the Fight CPS Facebook groups and stuff, and it's crazy because I go on there and I just read everybody's posts and stuff, and it's just horrible. I feel for everybody. And I see a lot of protests going on, not just in California, but in like a lot of other states. And they've been going on for a while. And I just feel like there hasn't been any changes being made. And so I feel like it would probably be like, I think I have an idea. So I feel like maybe if we come together as one and start some like countrywide protests, right? Together, then maybe we could be heard. But that's going to take a lot of time. So we'd have to have like maybe three people, let's say three people in charge of each state. Okay. And then they do the work on recruiting more people. Doesn't matter how, social media, just when you're standing in line at the store, just start talking to the person behind you or in front of you and see in the parking lot, we can put, small notes on gas pumps, whatever it takes, and we just start recruiting people. And then maybe when there's enough people, around the same time, we could go like around 2 a.m. or something, whatever, up and down the streets. Let's just say one city, we'll have one city in 2 nights, and just keep going from there around 2 a.m. with like a megaphone or something and just talking about CPS, because eventually people are going to wake up and be like, oh my gosh, I heard this. What the heck just, what are they talking about? And people are going to start talking about it, and then they're going to start knowing what we're talking about. And then, I don't agree with breaking the law and stuff, but CPS, they totally break the law and they violate our rights when they take our kids, and I don't think we should be getting a permit to use a voice amplifier. You know what I
Well,
mean?
Alan, let me tell you this. What you just said is a brilliant idea. However, two things. It's easier said than done. And by the way, it's already been done. There's a woman, actually, she's up in the Bay Area. She worked her butt off. And eventually, I think it was 2 or 3 judges were forced to retire up in the Bay Area. I won't say the county, but they actually retired because she was able to get the judges' names on a recall ballot. Now, I don't know how many hundreds of thousands of signatures you need, but she was able to do it. And instead of going to the recall election, this is what I read someplace, the judges retired because if they're recalled, they lose their retirement. These judges have great retirement and benefits. So instead of going through that, they just retire. And she was able to do that to some juvenile judges up there in a Bay Area county. She was very successful. Now, here's the problem. It was a lot of work. A lot of work for her. I think she still does it part-time. She called me a few months ago, asking me about a client of mine. But I don't see her as prominently as I used to see her on social media, and the best way to do it is on social media. I don't know if you're in California, so I'll tell you this. You know our Governor Newsom? I'm not asking your opinion about him, but a few years ago, they had an election where they wanted to recall him, right? Um, and they were able to get the number of votes to put the recall on the ballot. Now, California is a very democratic state, very liberal state overall, and nobody thought that he was ever going to be recalled. But what surprised everyone, and he wasn't recalled, but what surprised everyone was that they were able to get the thing on the ballot, which required a number of signatures. Now, there was an organization who was the head of this recall, and they were web based. They even had a radio show because that's how I met them. I met them at KABC Radio in Los Angeles. They had a website. They broke the state down into counties. They broke each county down into cities. They broke down every city into neighborhoods, right? It just went, they broke it down, broke it down, broke it down.
Hmm.
They had captains at every level. I mean, this shit was organized beyond imagination, and it was all online, all right? Online and telephone. I actually think that somebody copied their website because it was an amazing website, not for what it said, but how it was structured. And with the number of people and the ease and the cost involved, social media is probably the best way to do it. Now, everyone's not on social media. A lot of people are, though. And I think that's one of the best ways instead of going door to door. It's the most effective way, right? You reach more people than knocking on doors in a shorter period of time through social media.
Right.
I've seen a lot of these CPS Facebook groups. I really think they're a great idea. You know why? Because it calls attention to a problem. Now, are they doing it the right way or the best way? Not all the time, but at least they're trying. They're trying to give people information. You know, now here's the other thing. What you said about these groups uniting as one, that would be the most ideal situation. But you know why they don't? Because they're people. Do people ever join together? Isn't there always infighting? Someone told me once if you throw one crab in a bucket, he'll crawl out. If you throw six crabs in a bucket, none of them will ever get out. You know why? You know why? They pull each other down. People tend to be the same way. They're more interested in, the negative than the positive. But you're right. If people were ever able to join under one banner, imagine the change that would cause, not only in your county, in your state, in the country. Because it's reaching the point where the number of people that have been screwed by this system, it's outrageous. Why haven't things been done? Because people don't work together. You
Right.
know, there may be personal jealousies, there may be professional jealousies, there may be, I have a big critic on the internet. I won't mention her name, but she to this day, and this happened years ago, um, I refused to take her case. She wanted to sue a CPS in a certain county in California, and after a few phone calls, you know, I refused to take her case. I've never met her. I never worked on her case. I don't know if she's ever known any of my clients, but I'm the worst guy in the world. So, I mean, kind of stuff like that happens. And how do you deal with it? I once got a call from a guy in San Joaquin County, And he interviewed me. I interviewed him. I told him I can help him. He ended up not hiring me. And he called me back a few months later and he says, I made a big mistake not hiring you. He says, I lost my parental rights. And what you told me to do, the strategy you gave me, my attorney, he hired another private attorney, didn't want to implement that strategy. And he said, as the more I think about it, I don't think that attorney was very experienced and he just took my money.
Yeah.
And I said, I'm so sorry. Why didn't
Use on her butt. Sorry. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. No. Sorry.
right. So I said, well, why didn't you hire me? He says, oh, somebody on Facebook told me you were a bad and terrible attorney. Okay. I understand. It happens.
Yeah.
Instead of trying, it's bad enough we have to fight CPS. We have to fight all those social workers. But then we got to fight each other.
Right. There's a lot of tension actually going on in the world right now with just with each other, and like you said, it would be hard to have everybody come together. But maybe, just not even just for CPS, for just the whole system, period. It's everyone's just, I feel like most of the people in one way or another are getting their rights violated somehow.
Oh, yeah.
And if we were all to come together, actually, it would probably be huge. And
it would be unbelievable.
Yeah, it probably.
If you had the ear of 1 million people in California, which isn't a lot compared to the population, right? If you had the ear of 1 million parents and relatives in California, you'd be one of the most powerful women in the state. You know why? Because you would control voting. You would control elections. You would be such an influencer. Don't forget, in our system, judges are elected, appointed, and then reelected, or just elected. That means you and yours had to vote. People that make our laws, legislators and senators in the state, in Sacramento, they're elected, right? Now, here's one thing that, is going to blow your mind. Did you know that CPS workers are under the control of elected officials? The County Board of Supervisors, at least in California. Did you?
Know that.
Yeah, you didn't know that. What if you put in your own supervisors, the ones that are, want to reform CPS into your county?
Right.
And then and it's bigger than that. You got to go to the federal level. You got to go to your senators and Congress people. There was a very famous judge. I won't mention his name here in Southern California. He did a lot in trying to reform CPS and juvenile rules. But when it came down to it, his hands were tied in a lot of different ways. And I want to give you an example right now. He wanted to make courts, CPS courts, open to a certain extent, like to the press. One of the reasons why we have this country in the Constitution is because people were leaving England because of secret star chamber courts. Shit was happening and people didn't know what was happening. Well, CPS courts are kind of like that. There's no press control or oversight. The press is a huge check on what happens in our political system, and the judiciary is part of that. He wanted to open that up. He actually was going to sponsor a state law that was going to change that to a certain extent, allowing press in, the public in. The legislators that were going to write up the bill passed it by the Department of Health and Human Services, where they all get all of their funding, billions of funding. And they told them, the federal government told the state of California, oh, that's a nice law. If you pass it, it violates one of our regulations of confidentiality, and you will receive no more federal funding. Guess what happened to that law? Right in the trash can.
Yeah.
right in the trash can. So, I mean, but you're voting. If you're voting at the federal level as well in these elections, you can control. You got 1 million votes, Allie. 1 million votes. You have parents, you have kids that have aged out of the foster system, you have relatives, you have friends, coworkers, foster parents. You got a lot of people. A lot of people. At her height, the woman I was telling you about in the Bay Area, I read something where her sphere of influence was only about 100,000 people, which is a lot when you think about it, but doesn't sound like a lot. And I just told you 1 million. Do you know how influential you'd be? Do you know that you could make change? Now that would cause you to do something, change yourself, to take on that responsibility. You ever see that movie with Alan Alda, The Seduction of Senator Joe Tynan?
Mm-mm.
You have Netflix?
Yeah, I do. I don't really watch it too much, but is it on there?
It's on there.
Okay, what is it
It's a great-
called?
The Seduction of Senator Joe Tynan.
Okay.
It's about a guy, Robert Alda, um, who wanted to make change in the political scene. And he was elected on that basis. He had all the best intentions in the world. But when he got to DC, all of the distractions took over: power, fame, money, women, and he got sidetracked.
Mm.
That's, we're dealing with people. So ideas are great. It's the implementation that's a bitch.
Right.
It's the implementation. Just organizing something like that. I was talking to someone in my office about doing something like that, but I basically have to retire from being a lawyer and focus on that, 110% of the time. It's a lot of work to make change, and you can only do it if you have a lot of help with other voters. You
Right.
know, I mentioned this to someone, and I don't think they have it. I don't know if it's still legal anymore. But when I was growing up, I grew up in Los, An- Los Angeles, in South Central Los Angeles. It was an African American community, and for years, every time an election came around, 2 or 3 times a year, every household would be mailed a mailer. Okay, full color, front and back. It was a one-page kind of deal, 8.5 by 11 usually. And this card, this mailer, told you on the front and back who to vote for what position. So, as a, member of the community, you didn't have to do your own research. You know, we're just going to do what this mailer said. The mailer was sent out by an organization, a community-based organization, and they controlled the vote in South Central for years, decades. I remember asking my grandfather about voting, and he said, "Oh, he didn't have to figure out anything. He wasn't a good reader and writer to begin with, but this flyer told him who to vote for, and he voted for them. No questions asked." You know,
Wow.
if it's still legal, I don't know that it is. Imagine if you sent one of those to every person who's ever had a CPS case, been involved with CPS in a certain way. Can you imagine? Now, here's the other thing. You know how much it costs to do that?
Right.
It's hella expensive.
Mm.
Somebody was talking to me about a class action lawsuit a few years ago, and I explained to them why you needed $250,000 to just do the mailing notice. Everybody thinks, oh, we're going to start a class action lawsuit. Snap our fingers, no money needed, and they were shocked. It's expensive to start a class action lawsuit.
Yeah.
So now you can do those mailers, but you can do them on the on the internet. no postage, no printing. Problem is, you need everybody's email address.
Right. Who's gonna? I mean, hopefully everybody will read the emails.
There was one guy that I met a few years ago who was going to try to do the same thing. And what he did, he hired people to stand out in front of the supermarket. You know how you see people asking you
Hmm.
sometimes to sign up to receive his emails. And it turned out great idea. It just wasn't effective. People didn't want to give their email address. If you want to send me something, send it to my house. It's like email was sacred.
Yeah.
You know, not that it is, but you know how people are how they protect their email. They don't want
Yeah.
we're doing so much more and more digital. But can you remember the days where we would never pay a bill online,
Yeah.
right? Or the days you would never send money to someone via Zelle or Cash App,
Yeah.
right?
A
You remember
lot's
those days?
changed. Yeah,
You
a lot
remember
has
those?
changed.
Yeah, but it's changing slowly over time. And I am afraid that that is going to be the same thing for CPS. But you got to start somewhere. Got to start somewhere. I don't know if it will ever happen in my lifetime. I don't know about yours, but we got to start somewhere. And if you could be, it's going to take a very special person to unite all of those CPS groups. It would be the best thing for every one of those groups. But everybody has their own territory, fiefdoms, etc., etc. Just that's just how the DNA of the human being is made up, and it's CPS counts on those things. They're not worried. We're never going to unite. We're never going to unite and make change. Not in the next 50 years, at least. That's what they think. Somebody sent me a text, and they wanted to know of the lady's name in your Bay Area, because you can actually look her up on Facebook. Um, and Ali, if I, if I don't want to really say her name on this forum, but if you want to text me afterwards, I'll give you her name, and
Okay.
you can look her up on Facebook. And I looked at her, maybe a couple months ago. I looked to see if she was still active on Facebook and CPS Reform, and she is.
Okay.
She
Thank
is,
you.
and she is someone that has actually gotten stuff done. Actually gotten stuff done, but it was hard. It was a lot of work.
Right.
Hey, Ali, we are coming to the end of our show. I want to thank you for being on and being a guest today, the first day of the new year. I want to wish you a happy new year and a good rest of your Sunday. Okay?
Thank you. Happy New Year's to you too.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye.